Have you ever just stopped to notice that every single year, the money in your wallet, it just buys a little less? That coffee costs a bit more, your rent creeps up, the grocery bill gets bigger? We're always told that this is just a normal sign of a healthy economy. But what if it's not? What if it's actually a choice? That's what we're going to dig into.
I mean, it's the big question, right? You work hard for your money, you try to save it, but something out there is constantly quietly eating away at its value. Is this just some unavoidable law of physics, or is there something else going on behind the curtain?
And here it is. This is the core argument we're breaking down today. The idea that this steady drain on your purchasing power isn't an accident at all. It's a feature, not a bug, of our modern financial system. It's a deliberate, calculated choice.
Okay, so if it's a choice, our investigation has to start with the target itself. Where in the world did they get the number that basically runs our entire economy?
This is it. The magic number, 2%. From the U.S. Federal Reserve to the European Central Bank, pretty much every major central bank on the planet is obsessed with hitting this target. It moves global markets, it sets your mortgage rate, but where it came from, well, it's not what you think.
That's right. The number that quietly cuts the value of your savings in half every 35 years or so wasn't born from some deep economic calculation or years of careful research. Nope. It was basically improvised.
The story is actually kind of wild. Back in 1989, New Zealand's central bank governor, a guy named Don Brash, was on TV, and the interviewer asked him what he was aiming for. He basically just made up 0 to 1% on the spot. Later, that got formalized as 0 to 2%, and then other countries, they just copied it. All the fancy economic justifications we hear today, they were all bolted on after the fact.
All right, so the target itself is pretty arbitrary. So the next question is, how do central banks actually make it happen? How do they force prices to go up?
Well, it's a pretty straightforward playbook. Their main weapon is the interest rate. When they lower rates, it suddenly gets way cheaper for people and businesses to borrow money. That encourages more spending, more investment, gets the economy humming. But when you have all this new, cheap money chasing the same amount of stuff, prices have to go up. It's basic supply and demand, just engineered from the top down.
But they have an even more direct tool, just creating money out of thin air. And this chart of the U.S. Federal Reserve's balance sheet says it all. I mean, just look at that jump. It went from less than $1 trillion in 2008 to nearly $9 trillion by 2022. This whole process is called quantitative easing, which is just a fancy term for the central bank digitally printing trillions of dollars to buy up government debt and other assets.
And this really gets to a point the famous economist Milton Friedman made decades ago. He said that at its core, inflation happens when the amount of money in the system grows faster than the amount of actual goods and services being produced. So when you see that balance sheet explode, you know inflation is coming. It's not a mystery, it's just cause and effect. Okay, so if inflation is a deliberate policy, the next question any good investigator asks is, who benefits from all of this?
So to understand who benefits, you've got to know about something called the Cantillon Effect. It's an old idea from the 1700s, but it's more relevant now than ever. It basically says that when new money is created, it doesn't spread out evenly like butter on toast. The people and institutions closest to the money printer, governments, big banks, they get to spend it first while prices are still low. By the time that money trickles down to the rest of us, prices have already gone up. So who gets that new money first? Well, number one on the list is governments. They're usually the biggest debtors in the world, and inflation is a fantastic, stealthy way to reduce the real value of all that debt they owe. Number two, owners of assets. As the value of cash goes down, the price of real things like stocks, houses, you name it, goes up. And number three, of course, the financial institutions that are right at the front of the line to receive all that newly created money.
And look, this system didn't just appear overnight. If you look back over the last century, you can see the key moments that built it, piece by piece. You've got the creation of the Fed in 1913, a huge one in 1971 when the U.S. completely cut ties with the gold standard, basically removing the last real leash on money printing. And then, of course, the era of massive QE that kicked off after the 2008 crisis. Each step gave policymakers more and more power to inflate the currency. Now, if you ask a central banker why they do all this, the official story you'll get is that they're terrified of the opposite of inflation. Deflation, or falling prices. They treat it like this big, scary bogeyman. But is it really that simple? This is a really, really important distinction to make. There are actually two completely different kinds of deflation. There's the bad kind, for sure, the one caused by a total collapse in the money supply, like during the Great Depression, but there's also a good kind of deflation, productivity deflation. Just think about your smartphone or your TV. Technology makes them better and cheaper every year. That's deflation, and it's awesome. It makes our standard of living go up.
And here's the kicker. The system uses the very real fear of the bad, Great Depression-style deflation as an excuse to create enough inflation to completely wipe out all the benefits of the good technological deflation. So all those amazing gains from innovation that should be making our lives cheaper and better, they get swallowed up by this constant engineered inflation.
So, let's bring this all together. We've looked at the arbitrary target, the mechanism for creating inflation, and the motive for who benefits. What does all this actually mean for you, for me, for our financial futures?
Well, the system keeps going because a lot of powerful groups have a vested interest in it. Governments need it to shrink their massive debts without raising taxes. The financial industry makes a fortune from rising asset prices. It gives politicians an easy way out of tough decisions. And it even gives big corporations a convenient cover story when they raise their prices.
So here's the most practical takeaway from all of this. Understanding this system changes the rules of the game. In a world that is designed for permanent inflation, just saving your money in cash is a guaranteed losing strategy. Its value is programmed to go down over time. And that's why owning real assets, stocks, real estate, things that can't just be printed into existence has become less of an investment strategy and more of a basic defense mechanism.
Ernest Hemingway wrote this almost 100 years ago, and man, does it hit hard today. It's just a powerful reminder that these policies, which can feel good in the short term, often come with a very steep price in the long run.
So at the end of the day, the biggest thing to remember is that none of this is a law of nature. It's not gravity. It's a series of choices made by people in power. And that means that different choices could be made. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you see the trade-offs, if you were in charge, what choice would you make?